And the neurotoxins. I'm talking about it because I'm here fighting for black kids, and I'm fighting for all kids too. Because what this means to me,
we don't discriminate.
I'm talking about it because the leg. What is that? The mercury and the adjuvants and the neurotoxins do not discriminate based on color. They put the human body in a way that is detrimental, and until they get the message, we're going to be out here. We're going to be fighting, and we're going to be standing up for our lives, for the future of this country and this world. And until we solve these problems, we got a lot more than to do up here and we're about to pass off this night. Let's do something together.
And I listened to the debates, and I went up to every single Democrat and I asked them about medical freedom. They all sidestepped me. They all threw faulty patch of science. One person said to me flat out, had never met me before, I would never come in between a parent and their child. And that is Eric Underwood, who ran against Polis 2 years ago, who was also just ran for the U.S. Senate, and who sued the Democratic Party. He just sued his own party for improprieties in the caucus.
That's right, I'm back. You know, I don't know if you know the story of how I met Leslie Scott. All right, I'm back. You know, I don't know if you know the story of how I met Leslie Scott.
No.
I was campaigning for U.S. Senate in Longmont. He said, Mr. Underwood, would you ever come in between a mother trying to protect her child? And I said no. I gave her an instinctual response, a very human response, a very honest response. I didn't have to poll test that. And so that's when I started to get involved in this. This was not on my radar. This was not on my radar until Leslie Scott pulled me aside and started bringing me in and educating me.
What's up, dude?
And, you know, I ran for U.S. Senate, and through improprieties through my state Democratic Party, I'm not going to be on the ballot for U.S. Senate. In Colorado Springs, for that state Senate race, they try to correct it. You know, the state party leadership tried to correct those improprieties and put someone on the ballot, but the Democratic Party tried to sweep everything underneath the rug, and they kept everything that we fought to vote and for people like me to participate in this process. But I tell you what, I will be back.
Yeah!
Look, I'm a Democrat, and we align on this issue because I'm a consistent Democrat. You know, I can support a woman's right to choose, and I can also support a parent's right to choose as well. Look, to get on a high horse about big pharma, you know, especially with the opioid. You know, we got corporate executives now being indicted for pushing and creating this epidemic that we have in our country. But yet, we can't peel behind the veil of vaccine injuries and Now, I ran for governor in 2018. We wouldn't be sitting here right now if I was the governor. Because 163 would have been dead on arrival. go.
Excuse me.
Because 163 would have been dead on arrival on my desk. So, I say this, I'm going to testify today.
Thank you.
We're going to testify, we're going to try to shut this thing down. You see, they may have stopped me from going to the ballot in the June primary for U.S. Senate, but they can't stop my voice in the halls of freedom and the halls of democracy. So I'm going to close with this. We need unity in this country more than ever. We know what's going on. Black Lives Matter, and I'm glad that this country's consciousness, and I don't know what if I choose, and I'm going to stand with you, and I don't know what my political future will be, but just know this. If I choose to offer myself up in public service again, I just want you to stand with me as I stood with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. All right, y'all. We got another powerful voice. I want to bring a fierce protector of her children and of this movement. I want to give her a minute.
Thank you. So it was really hard for me to decide whether I could stand on this stage today because my values are not aligned with a lot of the values that were presented earlier. I am not a Republican. I am not a Democrat. I stand alone because I stand for truth. I'm going to read the testimony that I'm going to give in here in a little bit. My name is Beth Leba. I am representing myself, my children, and my ancestors. I am a fourth-generation Chicana Denverite and Northsider. I am a community organizer and activist who has spearheaded the 1 Billion Rising movement to end gender-based violence here in Denver. I have also organized with the Poor People's Campaign and have supported other Black and Indigenous-led movements, including Black Lives Matter. I am the proud queer mom of 2 fabulous queer and trans kids. My parents met and fell in love at North High School in the 1970s. My children have and do attend
for folks who are participating today. We will obviously have differences on the bill. Let's not have personal differences with the sponsors in particular. So these are friends that I work with and that I love, and I appreciate them very much. And so I just want to set the tenor from the opposition, and I hope that the opposition is fierce. And that we are pointed and we're direct, but not to these good friends, but to the bill. Let's
Sorry about all the changes, folks. It's just everything's happening so fast. I'm trying to change the stream and keep up with everything.
Representative Mason, did someone go after or call me? I'm just curious if you brought that up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was I'm fulfilling on a conversation that Representative Mollica and I had a couple of months ago when he and I just talked about how sometimes things can get very personal with the sponsor of the bill when the anger or the objection really is to the content of the bill, and it can get pretty heated, and sometimes it feels that way. No, I'm not responding to any. The one specific thing that I am responding to is my conversation one-to-one with Representative Mollica before the recess, and I just want to give this colleague of mine his due respect and kind of set the tone. That's all. That's
I just
all.
wanted to make sure. Okay. Are there any other questions? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one more question. question. It was about the online education model. I was wondering if you, and either sponsor can answer the question. I was wondering if you could maybe explain a little bit more about what that's going to look like, and I guess specifically what the overall message is going to contain within that, I guess, education, please.
Representative Walker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Williams, for the question. It hasn't, obviously the bill hasn't passed, and so it hasn't been created yet, and CDPHE will do it. I know in the bill specifically we have language that says that it needs to be evidence-based, scientific-based, and there is language in there to make sure that there's information on both the risks and benefits of vaccines as well, which is something I think that we heard from some of the opposition. So we wanted to make sure that there was language in there about that. And again, that's not an and to anything; it's an or. It's an additional option if you don't want to do the standardized form.
Representative Valdez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this one's for Representative Malika. You said that Colorado, and we've seen some information that Colorado has some of the lowest vaccination rates in the country, and I guess, you have more of a medical background than most in this body, and I hope you can explain to the committee why are vaccination rates so important?
Representative Malika.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What we're trying to prevent is an outbreak. And obviously we're living in the middle of a pandemic right now, and so we're experiencing what that's like, and what it's like not to live through that without a vaccine. And so we're trying to prevent that from a vaccine preventable disease such as measles, which is really what brought this to the forefront of my mind here in Colorado. And so obviously measles is actually much more contagious than what we're seeing from COVID and a lot of other things because it's airborne. It's able to stay in the air for much longer with smaller particles, and so it's much more dangerous and contagious. And so we're trying to make sure that we have enough people immunized to have what's called herd immunity. And for measles, that's about 95%. We're at about 87.5% here in Colorado right now is what our data is showing. And so obviously when you talk to the public health experts and the immunologists and the doctors, they're all very scared. And they were scared before. They're even more scared right now because we've seen what COVID-19 has done to our healthcare system and brought us to our knees. And really, I think everyone's worried that there's no way that we could deal with another outbreak of anything else. And so that's why it's so important that we have that herd immunity, and the rates that we're at are just putting us at greater risk of having an outbreak of something that's preventable.
Thank you, Representative.
So it's been brought to my attention that our wonderful world of technology is not working in the overflow rooms. And so to address this, I've been asked to take a little recess until it fixed. Because we do want to make sure that folks in the overflow rooms can hear the proceedings, since we have limited seating in here. So we're going to take about a 5-minute recess. Members, please don't leave the room. Thank you.
Madam Chair, are we done with questions? Then can we come back to the guys?
I would advise you to come back here. I think there probably are some more questions.
Okay.
But we should, I would spend the advisor won't take very long.
Thank you. I'm good.
Welcome to WebEx. Enter your access code or meeting number followed by pound. Enter your attendee ID number followed by pound. If you do not know your
Good afternoon, folks. Can anybody in the overflow rooms hear me? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Representatives Malta and Roberts, you can probably just stay where you're seated, if that's all right with the rest of the team. Representative Wagner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so my question, I guess it's probably best is Representative Malta. So the bill speaks to a medical and non-medical exemption. Currently, on the non-medical side, we look at existing statute. There is a religious side, there's another option. Why the need to blend the two into and then specifically a non-medical versus a medical exemption? You could elaborate on that. Would be interesting to hear what maybe some of the dialogue was in the stakeholder process and why that was thought to be necessary and needed.
Representative Malta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Wagner, for the question. Really it came down to wanting to streamline the process while we're looking at doing the, other states, when they have really tried to improve their immunization rates, have a lot of them have just eliminated the exemptions altogether. So we heard stakeholding and opposition that we didn't want to eliminate those here in Colorado. And so we really wanted to focus on the process, on making sure that what can we do in the process that would improve those rates. And two things came up was formalizing that process and streamlining that process. And so having a medical, non-medical as part of that streamlining the process. Mind you, you can still, it even says it in the statute that the non-medical is personal or religious, and you still have the option to say either one. But in a lot of our conversations that came up too was that it's really none of the state's business why you're taking that exemption. And so if you want to tell the state, that's fine, but if you don't, it's really none of the state's business if it's for a religious reason or a personal reason. And that's where it came from, is really trying to streamline that process, simplify it, come up with some standardized forms that formalize it, and still give people the option if they want to say it's for a religious reason or they want to say it's for a personal reason, that's their prerogative, but not mandate that they have to say it's for one or the other.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for Representative Malta. Let me make sure I just understood what you just said, is that there are states that have no exemption. And maybe I misunderstood.
Representative Malta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, there are states that have eliminated the religious and personal exemptions. I believe all the states continue to have medical exemptions, but there are certain states that have actually eliminated the non-medical or the personal and religious, or they may have only religious and eliminated the personal. So there's different states that have taken that route that in their view to improve immunization rates in their state.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further questions from the committee, let's begin taking witnesses. On our witness list to begin with, our first two witnesses, we will be calling folks up in panels of 2. Each witness has 2 minutes to speak. And since we'll have those 2 witnesses there, we'll just have a total of 4 minutes of question time for those 2 witnesses. I think that would be the easiest way to handle that. So our first 2 witnesses are Robert Kennedy and Andrew Boise. Please come forward. Welcome. Just make sure your mics are on. There's a little thing that make the bottom of the face. Yeah. Okay. So who would like to start? Would you like to, Mr. Kennedy?
Sure, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for having me here. And I only have 2 minutes, so I'm going to be very brief.
Would you like some water?
No. My voice has been screwed up for 20 years, and water is not going to help it at this point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
I really want to address my fellow Democrats, because I think this bill is antithetical to everything that our party stands for, and I think the presumption for kind of overwhelming all of those other values of our party, listening to women, my value, my choice, jury trials, standing up to big bullies in the pharmaceutical industry, is kind of overwhelmed by this idea that immunizations are going to solve a health problem. And measles is in the focus, and it was the focus of this debate. But measles is only one of, it represents, I think, 2 of the 72 doses that our kids get now. Many of those doses are not for diseases that are casually contagious or have any public health threat. They were put there as money makers for the pharmaceutical industry. The big problem is this. These are zero liability products, which means that in 1986, we had a DTP vaccine in this country. It was killing so many kids that the 4 vaccine makers went to Congress. They said vaccines are unavoidably unsafe. We cannot make them safe. We are losing $20 from downstream damages for every $1 that we're making on vaccines. We're going to stop making them unless you give us total immunity from liability. No matter how grievously injured, no matter how negligent we are, we cannot be sued. That's one problem. Congress gave them that. Now they have no incentive to make something that they said was unavoidably unsafe safer. Number 2, they have another exemption that most people don't know about. They are exempt from safety testing. Not a single vaccine of those 72 doses now mandated for our children has ever been tested against a placebo. And I sued HHS 2 years ago and said to them, and had this contention with them, because they were publicly saying some of them had been tested. None of them have ever been tested. And that means nobody can tell us a risk profile whether any particular vaccine is averting more harms and deaths than it's causing. And I don't see how you mandate a product like that.
Thank you, sir, for trying this out. Hold on just a moment. Mr. Bracey.
Okay. I didn't know if you were going with questions first or. So when I get involved in these things, one of the things I try to do is understand the other side genuinely and deeply. And one of the questions that I'm asking you to ask of the proponents and of the sponsors of this bill is to understand, where do you get your information? And many of them are getting it from doctors, from immunologists, from vaccinologists. They're getting it from their training in nursing school or medical school. They're getting it from the CDC. But what they don't see, and unless you keep asking the question, where did they get that information? Where did we get the information that we need to raise these rates? Where did we get the information that it's this effective, that it's this safe, that it has this profile? Because what you don't see is that unless you chase it down 3 and 4 and 5 and 10 layers, you don't uncover the web of pharmaceutical marketing money and strategy acting over decades to turn our institutions of government and our regulative agencies and our public health departments into, basically, I think your words in many places are sock puppets of the industry. And so that despite and honoring the good intention of the sponsors and the proponents, if you genuinely ask that question, where is that information coming from, and you continue to follow that up, you will find that it goes down to research, which Mr. Kennedy and some of his work and websites and things like that, you can find hundreds of studies that show the actual science, not the summarized behind the gold plate of the CDC. That's a firewall behind which all the snake pit of industry has orchestrated its deceptions. So what's going on is every time these things are being cited and they roll up to medical schools that are funded by pharmaceutical companies, studies that are funded by pharmaceutical companies, I just ask that on every point that's made throughout this afternoon, you ask yourself, where did that information come from? And really not accept a preliminary answer, but chase it to the ground.
Thank you, Mr. Royce. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative Ainsley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Kennedy, I've heard you make statements previously about, I believe it's called shedding, but anyway, the likelihood of catching something from a person, another child who has been vaccinated versus one who has not been vaccinated. Can you help me understand that concept?
This is one of the big fallacies that I don't think it's understood by people who are pushing for these kind of mandates, which are supposed to protect school children. If you look at any immunological protocols by Johns Hopkins, by CDC, or if you look at the vaccine inserts, they say that you should keep immunocompromised children and pregnant women away from vaccinated children. They do not never say unvaccinated children pose a risk. In fact, if you look at the chickenpox, Merck's varicella vaccine, manufacturers inserted said children who get this vaccine should steer clear of pregnant women and immunocompromised people for 6 weeks. The flu vaccine, according to the Cochrane collaboration, sheds 6 times as much flu virus as none, but you're 6 times more likely to infect somebody if you're vaccinated than unvaccinated. The pertussis vaccine, the DTaP vaccine, turns you into a lifelong asymptomatic carrier. So you're much more likely to infect somebody if you've had that vaccine, because if you get whooping cough, you'll stay home. If you get the vaccine, you're still spreading it the same as if you had whooping cough, you just don't know it. So you're spreading it to everybody around you. During the measles outbreak in California, the Disneyland measles outbreak, 39% of the children who got it had vaccine strain, according to CDC. So they got it from vaccinated kids. According to CDC, every case of polio in this country since 1979 has been spread from a vaccinated person. So every single one of them is vaccine strain. And today, according to WHO, 70% of the children of the polio cases on Earth are vaccine strain. They're being caught from people who've been vaccinated, not unvaccinated people. That doesn't happen.
Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Kennedy, thank you for coming to Colorado. And thanks for your testimony. I think we're having 2 different discussions, and I heard you mention the word mandate. So I'm wondering if you have a specific position on the bill that's in front of this committee today. Because you mentioned that you're opposed to mandates. Senate Bill 163, I'm curious your thoughts on specifically the policy we need to vote on today, and whether you have a position on Senate Bill 163.
I'm sorry, we're just supposed to identify some people.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know who's speaking, so go ahead, sir.
I apologize.
That's okay.
As representative, and let me address my biggest problem with it, is that it turns your state into a hostage of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, which is the panel, CDC does not actually decide which vaccines to mandate. That falls to a little-known committee called the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, which is made up of people who are not employees of CDC. They are industry insiders. And there has been study after study after study by the Inspector General of HHS, by the United States Congress, which did a 100-page report saying that committee is absolutely corrupt. It is absolutely captured by the industry. It has never turned down a vaccine, never not recommended a vaccine. The problem is that your Department of Health, which now you're giving all the power to the Department of Health to decide what vaccines on the schedule, what all these Department of Health do is they turn to ACIP and they said, what should we do? So it's the industry that's going to be deciding based upon its own profits. I'm going to give you one example and it'll take me 10 seconds. In 1999, Dr. Paul Offit sat on the ACIP committee and recommended the rotavirus vaccine be added to the schedule. It was because of his argument. He had his own patent on the rotavirus. And he was able, because he had voted that way, to sell his rotavirus vaccine in 2006 for $186 million to Merck. His rotavirus vaccine was then found to cause insusception, horrible deaths to hundreds of children, plus it has a poor kind of cytovirus in it, which causes wasting disease, which is like AIDS in pigs. Is still on the schedule. There is no diarrhea. Deaths have doubled since that vaccine was put on there. So your Department of Health is going to not make an independent determination.
Our time is up for questions. So, thank you very much for coming in today. Our next two witnesses are Pam Long and Carolyn Martin. And I forgot to announce this, but we do have hand sanitizer questions. Okay, who would like to go first? Ms. Marston.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Carolyn Martin, and I represent Christian Home Educators of Colorado for leadership. We oppose this bill. There is no need to change something that works. Boulder Valley School District proved that when the law is followed, vaccination rates reach desired outcomes. 3 areas I would like to address in regards to this bill. There was much more that could be said. Number 1, the intent of the sponsors to exclude homeschoolers from the new requirements. Number 2, the downgrading of the personal and religious exemptions in a non-medical exemption. And 3, the extraordinarily undeserved trust this bill gives to CDPHE. Despite claims by the sponsors of this bill and the amendment that passed in the Senate, homeschoolers remain liable in this bill. There are several different ways to legally homeschool in Colorado, and I hope that this committee will seriously consider amending this bill to clearly exclude homeschoolers. Combining the personal and religious exemptions into a non-medical exemption removes the gravity of these exemptions and takes away their significance. Individual religious liberty is foundational to our society. It has been long understood that the conscience of every individual must be protected. Our republic cannot stand without a people self-governed by their conscience, one that is informed by reason, knowledge, and by God. Once the exemption based on consciences are devalued, removal is one step away. In 2016, HSLDA had to intervene when CDPHE began mandating an official form, though the law did not give them that authority. The form contained viewpoint discrimination and compelled speech. This is only one of the things that has resulted in a lack of confidence and trust in CDPHE. So please vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Ms. Long.
My name is Pam Long, and I represent the Colorado Health Choice Alliance, 10,000 supporters in Colorado. My analysis of the data collection in this bill on a minority group was excluded from the stakeholder process. My slides were denied today for being paper in a pandemic, yet we're here today. CIS collects data to increase vaccine uptake by a reminder recall home visit program of coercion. SIS targets low-income Medicaid minorities and pregnant women for vaccines, including the influenza vaccine, which is not safety tested for pregnant women. The partial list of the extensive personal data to include address and employers, which is illegal, to enable coercion and to include targeting of adults. SIS operates under a false confidentiality claim, sharing medical data with a long list of entities not disclosed to the public. Personal data mining is financially incentivized to providers, and you will hear from them after us. 60 medical organizations lobbying for this bill to inherit $1.5 billion for selling personal data. Electronic health records in schools provide more accurate data with better privacy and no cost. The research shows that millions of dollars budgeted for SIS does not improve public health. There is no true opt-out of SIS, which is discriminatory to force only parents with exemptions into this registry. The SIS OIT audit indicates vaccine records are safer decentralized at the local level. SIS operates to coerce doctors to reach vaccine quotas and ignores risks of vaccines. Doctors will not write medical exemptions due to penalties. And in summary, SIS has no consumer protections and exists to sell vaccines under the guise of surveillance using personally identifying information and coercion. And I think Representative Malika summarized this best by, this is none of your business.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Are there any questions from the committee for this count? Representative Geiger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll add whichever wants to respond. I know we're limited on time, which is unfortunate. But my question has to do with the streamlining of this process. We've heard from the sponsor that the idea of combining the two exemptions into a non-medical would help streamline the process. According to the bill as you've read it, when we talk about some of the options, whether it's a learning module or what have you, and when you compare that against existing statute, do either of you have an opinion that this actually does streamline? I mean, are we going to see a more efficient process of going to getting exemptions and these sorts of things? If you could just elaborate, whoever wants to respond.
Hey, Mom. The streamlining is a red herring to strip people of their religious exemptions so that in a future bill you can delegitimize religion and say that it's a non-medical exemption, so therefore it's not valuable. These exemptions have been a protected class of people since 1978. There were no stakeholders involved that opposed this bill. That is everything you need to know about the promotion of this bill as streamlining and formalizing a process. The goal of this bill is to coerce every person from birth to death into every vaccine, including the COVID vaccine, with data mining, with people showing up at your home saying, do you want this vaccine? Do you want to keep your Medicaid benefits? Maybe you want to reconsider. That is a huge intrusion of religion. That is a huge intrusion of the American way of life. And no one outside, right now, the thousands of people, will comply with this.
Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Greitner, I'd like to add that right now, the way you do it currently is you fill out a statement, you just make a statement, and you put it to your local school district. That's it. To me, that's pretty streamlined. What is going to happen with this bill is now it's going to go into the database that she so elegantly spoke about. It's going to go all into the database, and that's hence the problem. That's the streamline. Let's get the data. We don't want them to have our data. Right now, Ohio has immunization data that is accessible to CEPHE, immunization data. I think you can assume if someone doesn't have immunization data in a database, they don't have that immunization. Thank you.
Ms. Long, I have a question. You mentioned someone having their Medicaid benefits removed if they refused vaccines for their children. Do you have a specific example of that happening? Ms. Long.
Parents have reported to us, the 10,000 parents that we service in our nonprofit, that they do feel that they are coerced and it is hinted and they are not informed of their exemption rights. So the absence of informing a family that they have the right to exempt is coercion.
My question was, Ms. Long, do you have a specific family a specific example of someone being denied, not a feeling, a specific example of being denied their Medicaid benefits due to refusing vaccination. Ms. Long.
I do not. I can follow up with you.
I can see it. Thank you. We only have 22 seconds if anyone has a very quick question. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Anyone can answer this. There's talk about this not being a mandate, but as I read it, if you choose to do the exemption, you're forced then to have an education component. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you. Yeah, that is correct.
Okay, that's perfect timing. Thank you. Questions is Scott. Our next panel is Cynthia Rodriguez and Courtney Saul. And because Ms. Long and Ms. Martin seem to be a little more familiar with the process, I was supposed to instruct you to introduce yourself and let us know who you represent before you start speaking with this side.
I think it's really hard to hear you. Could you repeat that a little closer to the mic, please?
Because Ms. Long and Ms. Martin have some experience, they know to introduce themselves, let us know who they represent. It's not an instruction that I gave, I just wanted to make it clear that we're supposed to have witnesses introduce themselves and let us know who you represent before you start your testimony. So who would like to go first?
I can go first.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thank you. My name is Cynthia Rodriguez, an immigrant and a vaccinating mom. This week it was made clear to me the intention of 163. It is to coerce, out, bully, harass, and threaten kids that hold an exemption. This experience illustrates what can happen to you when the government has your personal medical information. On my representative's public page, she posted a comment that had nothing to do with vaccines. She complained that Republicans were not wearing masks and emphasized that they are just a minority. I wrote back to her a long answer, and I stressed the need to snap out of this us versus them mentality, reminding her that the Democratic Party values is to protect minorities. I asked her if it was okay how people of color, LGBTQI, and immigrants like me were being treated. I discussed masks, science, and I asked her to make an effort just to cross the aisle. No mention of vaccines, no mention of 163. In this public page, in a small city of a few thousand people where my family is very active and fairly known, after a few nice words she says, I'm sorry if you don't agree on required school vaccinations. I understand why you don't want to vaccinate your boys. My own legislator posted on a public forum personal, private medical information of a minor, my son. With that comment, she put a child at risk. Many other vaccine-injured kids have already received credible death threats. She put a target on my child's back, a child who did nothing wrong but followed the doctor's order to receive a scheduled vaccination and had a horrible side effect. It was not a choice. This irresponsible, unethical, downright mean. In my own legislation, being a pharmacist, who told me she took very seriously seizures as a reaction, just decides to out my child's exemption like that. How can I trust a system accessed by thousands of people, according to the director of CDPHD, will keep my child's information safe? This episode made clear that the intention of 163 is to out kids who hold an exemption, bully and threaten them. It doesn't feel safe to be her constituent, to live in my small city anymore, or even in Colorado, where I have lived and built a life for the past 23 years.
Ms. Saul.
Hello, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Courtney Saul. I am a mother and the Colorado Immunization Information System, or SIS, site administrator for a preschool in El Paso County. I am not speaking for the school, but rather from my experience. When it came time for me to set up access and credentials for SIS, I was mortified to experience firsthand how easy it was to gain access to the personal and medical information of thousands of Colorado's children. First, I confirmed my school and requested removal of the previous administrator. The next morning, I was emailed a child care admin form from CDPHE. 4 hours later, CDPHE emailed me my login credentials. Another hour later, I received confirmation the former administrator had been removed. 2 weeks later, I returned my completed form and never heard from CDPHE again. In 17 hours, I was given access to the vaccination records for the entire state of Colorado with no true verification of my identification or employment or even the submission of the required form. The only thing protecting the entire SIS database from any nefarious act by a single user is the signature on the site information form acknowledging various responsibilities, a form that I completed 2 weeks after receiving my login credentials.
And as if the front-end security of the existing database wasn't concerning enough, with the addition of the online education module, a brand new door of hacking opportunity will be opened. Reviewing the fiscal note for this bill does not add any assurances. Good technology is expensive, and cybersecurity even more so. With disproportionately small fiscal note, I have to question whether or not proper stakeholding on the technical aspects of this venture was ever done. Data breaches are not uncommon and should be taken much more seriously than this. Some notable data breaches with companies with much larger security funding include Equifax, the Pentagon, Lockheed Martin, Target, iCloud, Yahoo, and countless other secure databases and networks. Is the state of Colorado really truly more prepared than these companies? I do not believe this bill will increase vaccination rates, but rather put the information of Colorado's children at risk. We will see much larger costs of implementing and maintaining and protecting the information collected and a much lower number of enrollments in our already underfunded schools. I urge a no vote.
Okay, are there questions for these witnesses from the committee? Representative Geiger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's Mrs. Saul. I was very interested in your testimony that you just offered as an administrator of the SIS system. We heard that the idea that we're supposed to look at with 163 is the streamlining of getting vaccine exemptions. But you just spoke to your experience in getting access to this as an administrator. Was there any type of educational platform, video, anything you had to go through, or was it? Could you kind of tell us a little bit about what that process was to gain access? I think I heard you say you filled out a form and then you waited on someone to give you your login credentials, not just roughly about it. I would be very interested in hearing some more about this, your testimony.
Ms. Saul. Yes, so there is an education module required. You do take a tutorial of how to use SIS and where to find information. And there's also information specific to what, like I have a preschool, so it's specific to preschool and childcare, and elementary schools get other ones. And it explains how the process works, what a proper form looks like, what a proper exemption form looks like, and what the letter that you would like to submit should look like. And it's very clear, they lay it out very clearly for you, and you do have to take that annually to be a site administrator. That is absolutely true, and I think it is fully informative. However, the very biggest concern is that I gained access and they didn't even call to verify I was who I said I was. It was just an email. They never called. My name's not listed on the website. It's not like you could just look me up and be like, oh yeah, she works there, no big deal. I was given access and they never required any proof of who I was. They never called my employer to verify I was an employee, none of that.
Representative Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mrs. Saul, can you tell me, so you filled out a form to get access to SIS. On that form, can you remember, was there any language around it saying that you can't misuse this information or any responsibility that you have?
For sure.
I'm
sorry.
By getting access to it or by being a program administrator, was there anything that you had to sign and was there any penalty if you misused that information?
Ms. Saul.
Yes, that is correct. It does say the responsibilities. I mean, obviously, it's a huge responsibility gaining access to all of this. I was given my login credentials before that form was completed. I didn't realize the timeline of all of this. It was not clearly communicated to me. I had the form. It was Thanksgiving break. I didn't think much about it until I submitted the form, and then I went back and looked, and I realized I already had access without completing that form. That's very concerning. And the form, I mean, anyone can sign my name and say they're me without actually talking to me or my employer. And it does say, you have to use it for what you're authorized. My school is on there. I'm using it for my school, but those kids aren't segmented out so that, if I wanted to look up your vaccine records, that's not, there is a penalty. It is, I believe, a misdemeanor. It's not secure, this single piece of paper with my signature, supposedly my signature. I mean, I signed it, but who's to say they never verified that? That's the concern.
Are there any further questions for this panel from the committee? Representative Geiger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you could just elaborate, what kind of information do you see inside of SIS? You said you can see statewide, but you only work for, is the school that you work for, is that school, they have multiple locations statewide? Is that, and what information do you see?
So it's not really separated. There's not a way to, CDPHE doesn't know who my students are. So I look up my specific students, verify their information, you know, especially when it's time to do the report. Some of them have had updates that they have not turned into me. Especially being a preschool, they get, you know, they get different vaccines throughout the school year. I mean, in theory, you could do that. I have not messed around to search for it because I did sign the paper. Specifically to my school. I'm the one with that information, not CDBG or SIS. And then in that, I can see who the provider was that inputted the information. I can see parent's name and address and the provider who put them in the system. I believe some of them include employer. It depends on what the provider put in, but you can see lots of personally identifying names.
Our next panel is Robin Ross and Dr. Shelley Bedford. And everything that you think.
My name is Shelley Bedford.
Okay, so this is Robin Ross. Does anyone know who Robin is?
She was here. Can we go out of order, Madam Chair?
Sure, I would, you know, let folks know that if you are on the witness list, Ms. Ryan, would you like to come forward since you are like up next? And I'll just replace her with you when your slot comes out.
Thank you.
Okay, who would like to go first? And I'm sure you've heard the instructions already, so 2 minutes to introduce yourself and that's what
Thank you. I'm Teresa Rang. I'm the Executive Director for the National Vaccine Information Center and Colorado resident. NVIC opposes SB20-163 because it's discriminatory and allows medical professionals and public health officials to sit in judgment of a minority of families' conscientious and religious beliefs against America's founding principles and forces the sacrifice of federal privacy rights to access the civil right to an education. This bill is being offered under the guise of equal effort and improved vaccination rates. However, equal effort has been met via the health department's requirement that submission of exemption statements to schools match the frequency of the submission of vaccination records to schools. The inconvenient truth is that existing laws provide accurate, publicly available vaccination rate information as exemplified by Brighton, Littleton, and Boulder Valley school districts. These districts are implementing existing law which confirms CDC guidance, which states that vaccination rates increase and exemption rates decrease when schools collect missing records. Missing records for Colorado's kindergartners often outpaces exemption rates. However, when schools follow Colorado's law, data shows that vaccination rates increase. NVIC has presented this information to legislators since the introduction of a similar bill last session. Colorado doesn't have a public health crisis. It has a clerical issue that's easily resolved by implementing existing law. Spinning data and rushing a controversial, unnecessary bill through the legislature during civil unrest will only accelerate the continued erosion of trust in government and public health officials and spends money the state doesn't have. Vote no on SB 163 and assure that all students will continue to be treated equally. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Dr. Bedford.
Yes, my name is Shelley Bedford, and I served for 8 years on the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education until I was term limited last November. I'm here to give you a school district perspective based on my familiarity with the vaccine data collection, storage, and reporting process in Boulder Valley, which is similar to other large districts in Colorado. I don't believe this bill serves any real practical purpose, and I would be concerned about a student's right to privacy if it passes. School districts like Boulder Valley have comprehensive systems for managing vaccine data and tracking student compliance. If students are non-compliant, it's typically for one of three reasons. One, the student doesn't have the vaccine record. Two, the student has trouble accessing vaccines. Homeless students, for example, often have difficulty with both. Or three, the parents don't get their paperwork in. When parents are reminded, many more parents take their children to get the required vaccines than claim exemptions at that point, meaning vaccine coverage goes up and exemptions go down. In 2019, for example, Boulder Valley, which has about 31,000 students, started the school year with 5,000 students missing documentation of vaccines or an exemption. 2 months later, after reminders and phone calls, that number was down to 1,100 students, mainly at the high school level. And by December, just 3 months later, there were only 25 students still missing their paperwork out of 31,000. Most parents simply weren't aware that they were not up to date. So if the purpose of this bill is to make sure student vaccine information is tracked, that is already happening. And if the purpose of this bill is to increase vaccination rates, districts have shown they can do that by just keeping on top of parents. Furthermore, when schools hold this information, student privacy is guaranteed by FERPA, but once the health department uploads it into their database, the information is no longer protected by FERPA.
Ms. Zinford is time is up. Okay, we have 4 minutes of questions. Do we have questions from the committee from this panel? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for coming in today. Our next witnesses are Michelle Moffitt and Dr. Katya Meyer. Welcome. We'll each have 2 minutes. Please, when you start your testimony, introduce yourself as your name and represent. Who would like to go first?
Thank you.
Dr. Meyer.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Katya Meyer. I've been a physician, including seeing children for family practice for 22 years. If a product is clearly a good choice by its own merits, it does not need to be forced, coerced, or manipulated onto the consumer. If a product is truly safe and effective, the makers should not need to be indemnified from liability. Yet all this is true for the pharmaceutical product of vaccinations. Advocating for true and good science to restore confidence into medicine would be more conducive to vaccination uptake than any of these manipulative measures that are, number one, violating a child's FERPA rights and privacy, violating the constitutional right of religious freedom, violating and undermining the right to a confidential and trustworthy doctor-patient relationship. Doctors whose oath it is to first do no harm are being abused as henchmen to execute an abusive law that violates their oath and violates informed consent, the medical ethical principle of informed consent. Instead, this bill gives arbitrary authority to an unelected government official who never went to medical school, does not know the children, to decide over the sovereignty of a U.S. citizen's body. This can only further erode trust and confidence in vaccination on both sides. This is not what I understood this country stands for when I gave my oath to uphold the Constitution against foreign and domestic harm in 2013. And this is not what I signed up for when I gave my oath to first do no harm. This bill is a direct attack on the freedom and sovereignty of a U.S. citizen. It goes against the sanctity of the doctor-patient relationship, and it goes against everything we learned about ethics in medicine. I refuse to be one of the henchmen. My loyalty is to my patient's well-being, the oath I took, and to upholding true science so we can restore faith in the promise of medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Ms. Malkin?
Thank you. I am Michelle Malkin. I'm a citizen of Colorado in America. I am a parent, and I want to say this. SB20-163 is a data mining Trojan horse that threatens religious liberty, parental autonomy, and our children's health and safety. This is much more than a vaccine issue. It is a civil rights issue, and it is a data privacy issue. The battle over SB20-163 is a battle over choice, control, and power. Who has dominion over our children's education, our bodies, and our data? Parents or the state? SB20-163 torpedoes the religious and personal belief exemptions for school immunizations in violation of our First Amendment rights, our federal health privacy rights, and our federal educational privacy rights. It will force responsible, informed parents to submit to a re-education course created by the very public health industrial bureaucrats who have been proven wrong again and again and again. Who will design this? On the purported dangers of hydroxychloroquine that was used to discredit President Trump, those so-called experts refused to grant independent reviewers access to their data. Is it the same so-called experts that presided over the notorious 1976 swine flu vaccine scandal, causing 45 million Americans to be unnecessarily jabbed with a vaccine for a disease that had fizzled out by the time that the shots were ready? Is it the same types of experts that were responsible for recalling 800,000 doses of swine flu vaccine for babies and toddlers after the products failed safety tests? Responsible informed parents exercising freedom of conscience and autonomy do not trust these experts on vaccines or data.
Are there any questions for this panel? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my question is for Ms. Mel. I wanted to give you a little more time to discuss this, but it did bring up a thought that I had, especially after hearing Mr. Kennedy's testimony. He talked about specifically pharmaceutical companies who are, I guess, in his estimation, certainly pushing for increased vaccination rates and also being a part of the data that helps justify their efforts to do that. And I think you were touching on that. I wanted to get a little bit more from you on, why we shouldn't, as a community, why we shouldn't trust, the claim that our vaccination rates are low here in Colorado. Therefore, there's a need for this bill to pass so we can increase them, and how that interplays with the pharmaceutical companies or the health experts.
I absolutely agree with Mr. Kennedy, whose organization and who Mr. Kennedy himself have done so much to enlighten the public about the truth of the racket that is perpetuated by big pharma lobbyists who bought off so many lawmakers. You do have to follow the money to find the truth. That's always been my investigative mantra, and I think it is very striking, and I think Colorado is blessed that you have people across the political spectrum who understand what's really going on here. It's not just big pharma that has a huge motivation to hijack our students and to undermine family and parental autonomy. It's also all of these Silicon Valley companies and educational tech companies that want to get their claws into this data. What happened to the bulwarks of HIPAA? What happened to the bulwarks of FERPA, which every parent in this room knows about, but so few people who actually serve in public office understand that is a sacrosanct right that we have to protect our kids' data as well as their bodies. And so the work that RFK has done and so many parental advocates here in Colorado and the nation have done is to challenge the very premise of the bill, that it is in the public health and interest to increase vaccination rates at a time when there are more and more studies that are discrediting the vaccine industry. With regard to data mining, what's really dangerous here is, can you answer the question, which third parties will have access to this data? What are you doing to safeguard that? There are lawsuits across the country right now by the Democrat New Mexico Attorney General, for example. Republican Attorney Generals are now going after this. The fact that we have so many millions of public school students who are being held hostage to online learning makes them guinea pigs. They are the product. All these things that we're giving away for free, who are exercising their freedom of conscience, a First Amendment right to practice their religion, to protect their children, as well as those who have philosophical and personal reasons for resisting the vaccine racket.
We only have about 30 seconds left. Representative Geiger, if you can make it quick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question is for Dr. Meyer. You spoke about your first do no harm. Do you believe that this bill would somehow make you violate that oath? Is that what I was understanding, or would you call it into question the oath that you took?
Yes, I am very devout.
Dr. Meyer, I'm sorry. I just have to recognize you. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Yes, I am very devout that informed consent is not really possible with this bill. Informed consent means the person who consents to a medical procedure is first informed, and second, gives a freely given consent. This does not allow a freely given consent. Not a freely given consent. This is not in line with the medical ethical principle of informed consent.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Your time is up. Thank you. Okay, thank you for coming in this afternoon. Our next two witnesses are Robin Ross and Laura Silverman.
Madam Chair, there's a request by a minor to stop the filming, please.
Since we're having discussions about First Amendment, we have TV cameras here in the room. I am not in any position to ask them to stop recording, because that would be a violation of First Amendment rights. If you are going to send a child to this hearing, which is very high profile, then I'm sorry that there's not a whole lot I can do about that. And so, yeah. Okay. Who would like to go first?
I will.
Okay, please introduce yourself and let us know who you represent.
I'm Rhonda Ross, representing myself.
Go ahead.
Many terrible ideas have been born of the best legislative intentions. Your legacy as lawmakers will be cemented if you pass 163 today. And I'm afraid that when you look back on that legacy in a few years, you will not be proud of it. When you hear the word anti-vaxxer, as we're called, it would serve everyone well to remember that that word stands for the sanctioned discrimination of vaccine-disabled children and their siblings, their younger siblings, who are unvaccinated because their parents saw what happened to them. SB20-163 sanctions the discrimination and targeting of vaccine-disabled children. This bill will require schools to deliver vaccination rate information to students, to our children. And you have to ask yourself why that is when this information is already publicly available on the Department of Health website. Well, I'll tell you why that is. It's because kids can be cruel. The bill sponsor is hoping that when children receive this information, that their school is not adhering to the 95% compliance rate that this bill also arbitrarily sets, that the vaccinated children will suss out the unvaccinated children and subject them to the bullying, the exclusion, the coercion to go become vaccinated behind their parents' back. And mark my words, if 163 becomes law, there will be child suicides stemming from this bill. The same type of people who are behind this bill are responsible for the fact that families of vaccine-disabled children are already being told, you people are not welcome to have a meeting in this church. You people are going to have to go somewhere else. You people are not welcome in this doctor's office, but maybe you can find someone else to take you. You people may not sit in this waiting room, but you can go sit somewhere
Ms.
else.
Ross, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Silverman?
Thank you.
I don't think your microphone is on.
I think this one works better.
There you go.
Alright,
Go ahead.
I would like to respectfully ask the press to not film me, and I understand if you still want to.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Florence Silverman. Earlier today, I marched alongside my fellow students and Black Lives Matter to stand up against police brutality and systemic racism. I am 15 years old. I represent myself and other radical feminists who know that the pharmaceutical industry and vaccine coercion and indoctrination, like what SB20-163 will do, only feed our racist, capitalist, patriarchal society. Democrats, I speak to you. Our system is in great need of reform. SB20-163 will only reinforce our culture of separation and conformity. SB20-163 forces an unfair choice upon parents. Either find a vaccine provider to validate your personal beliefs, or submit a state re-education module of yet-to-be-determined content and length. This bill will violate FERPA rights by non-consensually tracking the private information, the private medical information of unvaccinated students. And even if one opts out of the tracking system, how can one know that one won't be put into a separate tracking system that tracks those who opt out of the tracking system? You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. My vaccinated peers would have retained their privacy while I and many others would lose that right. The state, not the parent, would decide who gets to use and see our personal data. I have been bullied at school for expressing my beliefs on medical choice in an academic essay. If my medical information were exposed to my peers, I feared that I would lose many valuable friendships. Do not make it easier for my peers to discriminate against me. Do not violate my privacy. My faith in government is rapidly declining. Today, students, children stepped up and stepped into the Black Lives Matter protest because not enough action is taken. I am well aware that you are under immense pressure from your party to vote a certain way on this bill, and that you probably already have your minds made up. But please listen to me. Show me that our democracy is not a charade. Vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we take questions, I do want to remind witnesses that we will not impute the motive of sponsors or any other members. Ms. Ross, please remember that. And that also I know most of you knew this before you came in the room because you had a limited number of witnesses we were allowing, but we are only allowing for total time, witness testimony time for an hour and a half, and we are now at about 40 minutes remaining. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Okay, questions from the committee for these witnesses. Representative Champion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Young lady, you are very blessed. I'm so proud of you to come and speak in front of this. This has to be a scary place to be. It's scary for all of us up here. And we'd like to thank you for having the guts to do this and to tell us how you feel. And secondly, if you listen to the Eagles in Hotel California, checking out anytime that you cannot leave, you listen to the right music. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I hope my vote can make a difference, or my voice can make a difference.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, are there any questions? Are there any folks who want to ask any more questions for this panel? Seeing none, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Okay, our next two witnesses are Kevin Jenkins and Dr. Drushi. I'm sorry. Please tell me how to pronounce your name correctly, and I will do better. Who would like to go first?
The lovely Dr. Audrey.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Gurpreet Ahuja.
Go ahead.
I am a board-certified family practice physician.
I graduated from residency in 2005 through UW Health Family Medicine program through Madison. It was a rural program in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And I can honestly say in my 15 years of practice, you want to count residency, it's 20, we were never taught about the risks of vaccinations. We were taught which illnesses to give it for. We were taught the schedule we should give it for, but we were never taught the risks involved and how to go about in our critical thinking skills to figure out whether a disease is caused by the vaccines. So to say that the doctors should educate our as Representative Malika said, it's a burden on an already drowned medical community that's already on its knees. And frankly, it would be an irresponsible act on the part of the government who should be representing the people, we the people, because I am first and foremost a mother and then a physician. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Before you begin, I just wanted to make an announcement. I just heard that typically, and maybe our person with the camera did confirm, I should confirm that TV typically blocks out cases of minors. So just to give some assurance to the young women who just spoke. So they're not in a position to talk right now. They're really have to be that this way. Okay. Sir, please go ahead.
Yes, Kevin Jenkins from the Urban Global Health Alliance. Thank you for allowing me to speak before you today, Madam Chairwoman. I just, in these committee meetings, I know we have a short period of time, so we're kind of redundant, but I'm here to represent that minority, the group that people don't understand, that we have not been a part of this conversation. We travel all around the country and we talk to communities of color about not only the vaccine issue, but the importance of a good quality of health. And what we're finding out in this bill is we're directly opposed to 163. We're directly opposed to tracking any child. We're directly opposed to all of it. And after hearing these two gentlemen, I don't think it's necessary for this bill to move forward. On the heels of COVID and all the misinformation that's changed our lives, on the heels of all the things that are happening in this country with Black Lives Matter, or if you just heard this young lady, she's saying, we don't trust you. We don't trust you with our health. We don't trust you with our life. You don't represent us. Right now you're representing Big Pharma. Right now you're representing Big Tech. And there's no need for this bill. And the other thing that we are perplexed about is that we have not had a stakeholder discussion in this state anywhere about these issues. And we know that the mandated bills will be up again. We know that people will be cloaking, these mandated bills based on COVID. But let me remind you of something. Everything that we were told 12 weeks ago about COVID was not true. 0.1, 0.3 mortality rate. The same thing that qualified what happened a year before that. Everything that we've been told about vaccines, we are pro-safe vaccines. We're not pro-dangerous vaccines. And it's very clear that you're not listening. And for the Democratic Party, or the Democrats of this state, in particular Black Americans, not lending their voice to this because of our history, I am deeply offended. And to give us 2 minutes, to give us 4 minutes, and then to ask us questions is offensive. You should be out in the community explaining what tracking is going to lead to contact tracing, explaining the dangers of vaccines, not safe vaccines, but the ones that hurt our children. And we are offended that we're given that much time. We have traveled all over this country in places you won't go, in places government officials don't feel comfortable in. And guess what? We want this to stop. We do not support this bill. We do not support tracking children. We don't support parents having to prove anything to you, because it's our right. It's our constitutional right to protect our children. It's our constitutional right to protect our families. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions from the committee? Please, Representative Ainsley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Jenkins, thank you for bringing this to our attention, really sensitizing us to finding the stakeholders in the community, in all communities. Can you draw us in a bit more on how does it look like? How do we, when we're coming up with an idea like this one, how do we reach reach out to the black community or any other community of color, for instance, affect you and so on. I want to know from your perspective, how do we do that better?
Well, I mean, one thing you do is you talk to the stakeholders that you're aware of in your communities. You talk to them. You ask them to come to a meeting, or you take the meeting to them. They bring their constituents to that meeting. If it's a faith-based group of people, that's important. And just think about it. Today is Sunday, and there are no faith-based leaders here because they're trying to tend to their flock. They should be here. So we have to be open to talking to people. We need to be open to communicating with people. This bill is not necessary. I think you gentlemen are probably committed to people in your community, but this bill is not necessary. We do not need this bill. But what we do need, we need to have a bigger conversation in our community. We need to bring people to the table that don't understand this information. Because guess what? Next year, we're going to be back here fighting more bills. We know it. We see it coming. For the last 15 years, women and men all around this country, about 1 million people are saying something is wrong with our children. Something is wrong with our children. And nobody's listening. You know what they say? You know what they say to these women? Oh, you're a minority. Oh, you represent a special group. Oh, you're privileged. Well, I am privileged. I'm a black American, and I do not trust the government at this present moment. At all. You're not speaking for us. You're speaking for Big Pharma. Connecticut fighting this. Because right now, we do not trust our government. You are not our friends. You're not listening to us. And we have a history. Black Americans have a history of being lied to in this country. We have a history of being used as guinea pigs. We have a history of being lied to. And I'm offended by it. I should not be here today. This should have been taken to the community. And guess what? The stakeholders that don't want to be involved in this, shame on them. Because everything we've been told for 12 weeks has been a lie. The data and science speaks for itself. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to identify those people who was Mr. Jenkins because he started speaking before I had the opportunity
Oh, I apologize.
to identify him as the speaker. We have about a minute left for questions. Representative how is this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A quick question for Dr. Abuja?
Correct.
Excellent. I have my background in family practice. However, I have my own private practice where I practice functional medicine, and I see vaccine injured children all the time. Mothers coming and crying and saying, we don't know what to do. I have, in fact, if I may, a lady whose son is now 14 or 15. He has been sick just from topical steroids and vaccinations containing these steroids, and it's affected the quality of their life. It's affected their relationships among each other. And if you look at it, those effects that are brought onto the community at large. I mean, if I'm not a happy mom, as I say, well, mama
I guess my question is just for clarification. Would that mean that I would not get to testify?
You would probably take their place, and I don't know.
I would take their place, or they would take mine?
Maybe you would take their place.
Madam Chair, I guess I would ask that you would consider expanding this proceeding on issues and bills in the past that have been as divisive and as highly fraught as this one.
You know, Mr. Burford, I am not. The rules and guidelines for this committee were clearly laid out an hour and a half of witness time for both sides.
I do.
So you can either tell me whether you want to see, give your time and take that person's place or not. It's a simple question, yes or no.
Just stay.
Madam Chair, I would like to at least take my 2 minutes, and then I'm happy to cede time in the question and answer period for my part. So we'll proceed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Burford.
My name is Brad Burford. I'm here speaking on behalf of the Commission for the Protection of Constitutional Rights and the Colorado Chapter of National Lawyers Association. I'm a Colorado licensed attorney, and I'm here to talk about SB20-163. A central proposition of this bill is that the government says that vaccinations are good for people. Therefore, it posits Coloradans who desire an exemption from immunization for students must surrender their granted, clearly not exactly true to its claim there. Religious liberty is a cherished First Amendment right. By effectively eliminating the protected class of the religious from the state statute that has until now preserved the protected class of religion in immunization decisions, the statute tramples the rights of those who are religious. And privacy in medical decisions has many times been recognized as legally sacrosanct when it comes to medical decisions involving children. SB20-163 makes parents who desire these exemptions choose between two fundamental liberty interests, privacy and free religious exercise, not to mention their parental rights. Justice O'Connor wrote for the Supreme Court that the liberty interest of parents in the care, custody, and control of their children is perhaps the oldest of the fundamental liberty interests recognized by this court. In a separate case, the Supreme Court said simply because decisions of parents are not agreeable to the child or because it involves risk does not automatically transfer power to make decisions from parents to some agency or officer of the state. There are also issues in connection with this bill and whether it's actually mission critical during this time and about limiting testimony on the bill. The bill also circumvents HIPAA and FERPA, which are serious privacy problems that this bill presents from a legal standpoint.
Okay. Senator Munro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Kevin Lundberg. I'm representing myself. I cannot help but make a comment, having served as the chairman for the Senate Health and Human Services Committee for 2 years, that the decision is simply yours as to how much time you're allowing. Thousands of people have shown up to express their concerns, and I find your let me move on to one point. This is the only point I want to make. And that is the sponsor cited something like 87 or 80-some% vaccination rate for students here in Colorado. I want to refer you to page 4, line 11, where it says during the 2018-19 school year, 28,874 children through 12th grade students attended Colorado schools without protection from one or more vaccine preventable diseases. Now, if you do the math on that, you'll discover that over 96% of public school students in Colorado are fully vaccinated, according to the bill itself. Now, I'm not going to hold the sponsor really responsible for this inaccuracy, because my real point is this. In my 16 years in the legislature,
bill. So, you know, we spoke about streamlining it, and you're saying that we're taking the religious piece away, but it says it right there that the non-medical is, you can put it in for either for a religious reason or that you're opposed, or a personal reason that you're opposed. So can you speak to that a little bit?
I'm assuming that's for Mr. Berkeley?
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Mullica, for your question. The bill does purport to protect the religious liberty exemption, but what it does is it erases it. And as soon as you start erasing somebody, you start losing the protections for them. You start losing their identity, and it's extremely important. And I don't know what the impetus might be for doing that, but I don't understand why you would take that out unless there's some reason for taking it out. And I think there are a lot of people who think that the First Amendment is important and that their religious liberty interests be maintained by the laws of the state, and I would think that this lawmaking body would agree. So we could look through the bill and see how this is not streamlined, how additional steps would represent less streamlining. It's more difficult. More steps mean more difficulty. So I don't think we're headed towards streamlining here, when all parents had to do in the past was circle or mark in a box essentially on a school form.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Mittensis from the committee? Okay. Seeing none, thank you for your time this afternoon.
Madam Chair, if I might, I think there were 2 minutes left on our time. I would implore you to allow the people who wanted to speak to use at least that 2 minutes. Thank you.
There was one gentleman who I was asked about who would, in our motion, would have made the time. The other 2 folks are at the bottom of the list, they probably should have made it. Aaron Underwood would probably have made it if you would have.
Very much, yes, Madam Chair. Eric Underwood. Again, I will review the request for Mr. Rupert and missing one name. Sorry.
I don't see Mr. Rupert on our list at all.
Madam Chair, there are these 3 gentlemen that are now. And if
Right,
Mr. Rupert, you'll see him.
I don't see Mr. Rupert's name at all on this list. Period. So, whoever is Mr. Underwood is welcome to stay, whoever is not, I'm sorry.
I'm Eric.
You're Eric?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Rupert, I'm sorry, there's another witness who is ahead of you.
I'm Mr. Wilson.
You were not called.
Someone said my name.
No, I said you were at the bottom of the list and then all that, because we would not make testimony.
That's okay.
I called the witnesses, not Representative.
And I appreciate that, Madam Chair. Just trying to make sure that the voice was heard, and if we could get a concession maybe from those that are on the list.
I would try, they were at the bottom of the list, and if I were replacing somebody else, that person would be able to testify as
I understand, Madam
if
Chair.
we're using that time correctly.
I'm seeing some head nods from the members that are testifying. It seems like we may be able to make a concession that the members
Then
are
they will
not.
not likely to lose their testimony. All right.
I'm seeing head nods, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Just so everybody's Mr. Underwood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Eric Underwood. I am a former Democratic gubernatorial candidate in 2018 and a former U.S. Senate candidate from this cycle in the Democratic Party. And I'm also the CEO of My 24 Hour News and chairman of Illmatic Ventures here in Denver. I'm here because I see a lot of hypocrisy in my party. Lots of it. When the Republicans in southern states and other states around this country were mandating women who wanted an abortion to watch a video, we were up in arms about that. We said that wasn't right. Then why are we throwing roadblocks in front of people who have rights that want to protect their children? Why should we mandate that they watch some kind of education video or education modular when they've already made up their minds for the right choice for their families? This is not who we are as Democrats, and I'm speaking as a Democrat. The 15-year-old that was up here earlier, it took my breath away. She had so much courage. And I actually have hope for the next generation. And I have hope for that generation. There are people out there marching in the streets because of injustice and intolerance and the original sin on this country. This country has a history, especially in regards to people of color. Do you not know about the Tuskegee experiment? Come on now. Injected syphilis in the men. Now, I'm actually for safe vaccines. All right, so let's get that clear right off the bat. But please vote no and vote this bill down.
My name is Theo Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of Shop Talk Live. Just a community activist, especially in the movement for Black lives. And I'm saying to you right now, be careful, Democrats. Be careful. Because what you're about to do is cause a backlash to your party like what you've never seen, especially among people of color. How is the party that stands for a woman's right to choose to do with her body going to remove the right to choose from poor folks? I don't get it. Where's that from? It seems like it's from Big Pharma. I don't need to rehash these words with you all, but I will say that the evidence in this movement that gets branded anti-vaxxer, that gets relegated to the sidelines in the debate about what is right for our children, is pointing to the fact that those who are in the movement didn't want to be in it. That's what's so crazy about it, man. When I ask your average pro-vaccine person, whether it's a politician or whether it's somebody just in the general populace, where did this movement come from? They have all sorts of funny answers. But what is not being talked about is that these parents woke up to a living nightmare where their children were permanently altered due to trusting a medical system, a system that has a history of experimenting on black and brown bodies to figure out what to do for white bodies. You see what I'm saying? This is the history that's at play here. So how do you engage these communities? You make sure that you are talking to them in the context of their history. And in the context of our history, this bill simply, and the data mining thing, oh my God, right? So basically with all of this anti-vaxxer fervor out here, you're going to subject children to the will of the mob, to the fear of the people in their school and their community, to make them targets. That's dangerous. If you as a party enable as Democrats, you will lose very, very many elections, and you're going to lose your base, which is the black community, which I guess accidentally I'm speaking for today.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Very good timing. Let's just finish second, try 2 minutes. Are there questions from the board? Representative Baisley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wilson, I'm thinking that you're probably a Colorado person.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Denver, a few blocks from here.
Awesome.
St. Joseph.
Okay. So, and that's really what I wanted to ask about you, because there are folks that are catching the plane, flew in and so on. And I've met you before, and I just hope that you would explain your native perspective, Colorado, Parker, I think, I'm not sure where exactly, and your political background as well. I want that clear for all of us.
Listen, man, I'm a registered Democrat, been a registered Democrat since the beginning. I'm lately leaning independent and finding myself in league with people who have conservative values. My only allegiance is to what's going to help my community. And right now, I see that the legislation allows very dangerous loopholes for human nature. You see what I'm saying? It's not what's on paper, it's what the people will do with the paper that you all sign. And what is the most salient point to me is the fact that you're allowing people to be targeted. Like anything that looking like minorities may actually be subject to any further discrimination, especially with the history that we're seeing in these communities around black children and what happens to their bodies. We have different reactions sometimes to these supposed medicines. And if that's not taken into account, you can't put your signature on it, especially the party that we entrusted with our protection. That's why I'm here.
Are there any further questions? Representative Williams?
I'm sorry, man. I'm trying to think Representative Becker actually. Okay,
I didn't see it, I'm sorry.
No,
I'll confide it, Rick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to ask you, with respect to vaccinations, what do you see this bill, because the whole goal, the intent and purpose is to increase vaccination rates. Specifically, with your community, what are the dangers of trying to increase those vaccinations?
Well, the bottom line is that...
Mr. Wilson, sorry, this is just an announcement.
Cool.
That's all. Go ahead.
So what we're seeing is that there are some disproportionate rates of vaccine injury in my community. For example, there's certain adjuvants that are used in more expensive vaccines that can be afforded by those who can buy them, that are not as harmful as the adjuvants that are in the vaccines for the very same diseases given to poor communities, right? And so that's going to cause, since race and class are linked in America, that's going to cause disproportionate injury rates in my community. You see what I'm saying? So when you are targeting and diminishing the power of personal and religious exemption and just putting it into the non-medical exemption category, that means that the next bill, it'll just target non-medical exemptions and then you kill those rights. You see what I'm saying? And I think that if you're confused about why we're here, that's why we're here. It's for the next bill coming after this. It ain't just what this bill does. It's the thing that's going to be on the horizon. That if we don't do this now, the incrementalism that we've seen time and time again remove freedoms, this is going to be a Trojan horse for something that unfortunately you can't ignore the conflict of interest in medicine, especially when it comes to our children. That's what I'm saying.
Because they like protesting.
We have time for a very short question. Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for coming to this afternoon.
He had a question. I seen you, bro.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your resolution.
That's all right.
They only have 10 seconds.
Okay, well then I'll just make a statement. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for coming today and expressing your views. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you. Maybe.
Okay, our next witnesses are George Brooks and Kate Taylor. We have 13 minutes left before our time is up for the witness testimony. So I'm sure you've heard the instructions, 2 minutes each, and each yourself as you represent. Who would like to go first? Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I am Kayla Miller, and I am a family nurse practitioner. I am here representing myself and my family. I have been working in healthcare for over 15 years, and I oppose SB20-163. Making it more difficult for fully informed individuals to opt out of an invasive medical procedure goes against the very core of individualized patient-centered healthcare. As a nurse and as a nurse practitioner, it has been ingrained into me that if the patient has been provided all of the necessary information, they always have a right to accept or decline treatment or procedure, even if their choice is not what I believe is the right decision. This is called full informed consent. In my experience, it is often the fully informed individuals that are declining vaccinations, and is their right to be able to do so. It is the basis of medical practice today. Full informed consent and patient-centered care. If patients do not consent, they should not be forced to have their children tracked in a statewide medical database, complete education on a topic on which they are already vastly informed, or have to beg a medical provider to sign off on a non-medical exemption. Today's climate is often very hostile toward any provider or patient that strays from the CDC guidelines for vaccinations. As a provider, I can tell you it is very unlikely that most medical providers will sign off on a non-medical exemption for a patient declining vaccinations. This means the only other option to exempt is from even one vaccine is to complete an education model that will grossly underestimate the risk of the vaccinations and possibly also conflict with the individual's religious or personal beliefs. If families do not have internet access, they could be greatly burdened by the task of completing the alternative education module. This increased burden is more likely to happen in lower income households. Also of note, Canada had mandated similar modules for vaccinations and found that since 2017 they did not persuade any single vaccinating parent or vaccination declining parent to accept beginning vaccinations. With all of the necessary budget cuts this year, we don't need any money to waste on a bill that requires this amount of financial burden without a lack of benefit. Please stop this non-essential bill, SB20-163, from going any further in the legislative process. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brooks, you may speak.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and to the committee, thank you. I'm Joyce Brooks from Denver NAACP and an elder from the Black community. I'm very saddened that no one came to us when this bill was started with you guys and the senators. Our current laws on vaccines for school entry sufficiently protects our rights. Thus, there's no need to create a new bill such as this. So I'm asking you to vote no on this bill. Years ago, experimental vaccines were pushed on the Black community. I watched as children were forever changed by these injections. That distrust continues in our community. The CDC whistleblower, William Thompson, produced documentation that the CDC threw away damning evidence that young Black boys are 3 times at risk and have severe adverse effects in that MMR vaccine. The history of pharmaceutical misconduct in relationship to the Black community is well known, and clear evidence exists that is still happening today. I urge you to truly represent us, your constituents, by informing us when such bills are coming forth. And as you move to make a decision on this, and I hope your vote will be no, think about how they did not come to us, how they did not talk to us about this and get feedback. Vote no.
Thank you, ladies. Are there questions from these witnesses from the committee? Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a question, but I did just want to thank Dr. Brooks for coming here today. You've always been such a strong advocate for your community, and you definitely have my respect. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you for coming here.
Thank you.
Our next 2 witnesses are Jay Parker and Russell Parker. I see a Joshua Parker. I'm guessing are y'all all a family? I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, you called my name and said I wasn't on the list. I'm on the list.
No, I said you were at the bottom of the list, and we're unlikely to make it under the time we have left to testify.
And we can't extend the time?
No, sir.
May we present as a family or?
Yeah, if that's what you want to do, that's fine.
Thank you.
But I will limit question time to 4 minutes.
That's
so
fine.
that's for the four of you. But you each get 2 minutes to talk. I'm not sure how. There's another chair over here, maybe.
We're good. Thank you.
So there's 3 or 4 of you?
There's 3.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So, just introduce yourself, let us know who you represent. We each get 2 minutes, and then we'll have 4 minutes for total time for questions when we're done. Who would like to go first? And we only have 6 minutes left, so
Okay.
maybe we'll let you only have 2 witnesses go. And then
That's fine.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. My name is Joshua Parker. I am a sophomore in high school, and I oppose 163. My family and I had our genetics done, and I'm part of the population that is genetically predisposed to a crippling vaccine reaction. Even though my vulnerability is scientifically proven, my family and I are called anti-science, dangerous, stupid, and carriers and spreaders of diseases that we don't have. I have a medical exemption because of my genetics. But this bill calls for CDPHE to annually update exemption rules based on ACIP guidelines. Most current medical exemptions, including mine, do not fall under these extremely narrow ACIP standards, which effectively removes not only my medical exemption, but nearly every medical exemption currently on file. In short, in spite of what the sponsors say, the unintended consequences of this bill being passed is the removal of nearly all medical exemptions. Aren't I the one this bill is supposed to protect? Pro-vaxxers threaten people like me, and having my personal information in an easily accessible database is extremely scary for me. I nearly died when I was a baby, and my parents have turned themselves inside out ensuring our family's health. Getting death threats when we are doing everything in our power to stay healthy is frightening. Paradoxically, my siblings and I have never had an antibiotic, a visit to urgent care, or to a hospital for illness. Medicine is not one size fits all, and we are proof that there are other ways to stay healthy. The scientific method is clear. In order to determine safety, you must use long-term, double-blind, inert placebo studies. That has never happened with vaccines. Therefore, there is no safety profile. While pro-vaxxers claim that the science is settled, there is nothing to back up their claims of safety. Furthermore, the ingredients in vaccines are concerning because a majority of them have been proven biologically harmful in some way. Yet without further science, their safety in combination when injected remains unsure. My parents were afraid to bring me and my siblings here today during a pandemic and civil unrest, but the consequences of this bill passing could forever change our lives. Please vote no.
thank you for your testimony. And so we only have time for one more. Which of you would like to go? Would that be you, sir?
My name is Russell Parker, and I am a member of the Democrats for Medical Autonomy. I'm a former Democratic lobbyist. I worked for Governor Romer and President Clinton and President Obama's campaigns. I find that SB20-163 is proof that my party has abandoned my family. My body, my choice. The Colorado Constitution guarantees free education for all residents of the state between the ages of 6 and 21 years. It does not, however, grant the legislature the power to establish a litmus test for access to free education for all. As vaccine legislation across the country has been enacted, in every case, subterfuge and manipulation had to be employed to pass the legislation. Once again, here in Colorado, we find Democrats manipulating, refusing to listen, shutting down the voices of families these bills affect, and causing further distrust of an already corrupt industry. As Democrats exclaim outrage about Vioxx and the opioid crisis, they hypocritically manipulate constituents into buying the only liability-free product made by the same corrupt companies. Pharma obviously can't police itself, so HHS is required to do so by law, all the safety testing, and report to Congress biannually. Yet FOIA requests show that has never been done. in the 30 plus years since the law went into effect. And what's worse, the vaccine kangaroo court has no discovery process, so if pharma is hiding something, we have zero consumer protections in place. While a child who has hepatitis B is covered by FERPA and HIPAA privacy, this bill ensures that a healthy child who does not have a vaccine for hepatitis B must have private information put in a tracking database and loses their FERPA protection. How does that even make sense? Why is the Democratic Party becoming the marketing arm for the most corrupt industry on the planet, creating a minority out of healthy children, and refusing to read the newest science on this issue that shows unequivocally that we are trading short-term childhood illness for long-term chronic diseases? We have an epidemic of chronically ill kids, and you're worrying about a fever and a rash in 5-year-olds, which this bill does not even address. If public health is the issue, this bill is not the answer. Please vote no.
Are there any questions for our two witnesses who spoke from the committee? Representative Baisley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For any of you, really, there's quite a bit of talk about the percentage. 86% compliance is over the percentage of compliance so far. How does that relate? How does that relate to kind of the reality, of the illness? Is there a correlation of the goal of 95, 96%? And the number of illnesses that we're seeing, or is it 87%? Are we pretty good there? What's the science tell us?
Mr. Parker, would you want to answer that?
Basically, what's going on here, our understanding is a 1-month-old child needs no exemption for their 2-month shots. But we are asking 5-year-olds to fill in an exemption for booster shots that are not required by the CDC until age 6. This bill calls for following those guidelines and therefore does not fix the problem. So basically the rates are lower because they're waiting, those kids are waiting until they're 6 years old per CDC recommendations. So in essence, this is a bill that's looking for a problem.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. What I'm really trying to understand is there a cause and effect there? Is there a correlation between the rates? We're told all the time that the rates are lowest in the country. Is there an instance of disease lowest in the country?
No.
Does it fall?
I'm sorry, Russell Parker.
Can she answer this question?
You should testify. Please answer the question.
Okay.
It's up to you.
We are the healthiest country in our state in the country.
So I think that answers your question. There is not a correlation between health and vaccinations.
Okay, are there any other questions for this, from the committee? Seeing that, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for your time.
We have now exhausted the time limit given to the opponents of Senate Bill 163. We will need to clear the room to seat the supporters of the bill. So thank you for your time today, and I will ask that Ms. Lee go ahead. And we're going to take a 10-minute recess to clear the room. Thank you very much.
comply. We will not 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 comply.
Pharma's not my daddy.
Who's your daddy?
Pharma's not my daddy. Say it. Pharma's not my daddy. 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 Keep going. Bang the drums. Use the cowbells. I need more cowbells. Need more cowbells. Pharma's not my daddy. 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 Keep them loud.
As loud as you can! As loud as you can! As loud as you can! They hear you! They hear you! 163 is tyranny! 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 We need everybody yelling! We need everybody together! We need all of you connected and in unison with your voices! Be proud! Be strong! Be brave! This is your time! My child, my choice! 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 Keep going! My child, my choice! My child, my choice! Loud! My child, my choice! My child, my choice, my child, my choice, my child, my choice. 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 Make some noise! As loud as you can, everybody, make some noise! Make some noise! You're all beautiful. You're all beautiful. Let them hear you. Let them hear you. Kill the bill. 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 Kill the